frog is any member of a diverse and largely semi-aquatic group of short-bodied, tailless amphibian vertebrates composing the order Anura, coming from the ancient Greek letter 1F0 new Omicron rho alpha, literally, without tail. Frog species with rough skin texture due to wart-like parotoid glands tend to be called toads, but the distinction between frogs and toads is informal and purely cosmetic, not from taxonomy or evolutionary history. Frogs are widely distributed, ranging from the tropics to subarctic regions, but the greatest concentration of species diversity is in tropical rainforest and associated wetlands. They account for around 88% of extant amphibian species and are one of the 5 most diverse vertebrate orders. The oldest fossil, proto-frog, Triadobatrachus, is known from the early Triassic of Madagascar, 250 million years ago, but molecular clock dating suggests their divergence from other amphibians may extend further back to the Permian, 265 million years ago. Shutterstock. Explore. Adult frogs have a stout body, protruding eyes, anteriorly attached tongue, limbs folded underneath, and no tail. The tail of tailed frogs is an extension of the male cloaca. Frogs have glandular skin, with secretions ranging from distasteful to toxic. Their skin varies in color from well-camouflaged dappled brown, gray, and green, to vivid patterns of bright red or yellow and black to show toxicity and ward off predators. Adult frogs live in both freshwater and on dry land. Some species are adapted for living underground or in trees. As their skin is semi-permeable, making them susceptible to dehydration, they either live in moist niches or have special adaptations to deal with drier habitats. Frogs produce a wide range of vocalizations, particularly in their breeding season, and exhibit many different kinds of complex behaviors to attract mates, to fend off predators, and to generally survive. Being oviparous anemniotes, frogs typically spawn their eggs in bodies of water. The eggs then hatch into fully aquatic larvae called tadpoles, which have tails and internal gills. A few species lay eggs on land or bypass the tadpole stage altogether. Tadpoles have highly specialized rasping mouthparts suitable for herbivorous, omnivorous, or planktivorous diets. The life cycle is completed when they metamorphose into semi-aquatic adults, capable of terrestrial locomotion and hybrid respiration, using both lungs aided by buccal pumping and gas exchange across the skin, and the larval tail regresses into an internal urostyle. Adult frogs generally have a carnivorous diet consisting of small invertebrates, especially insects, but omnivorous species exist, and a few feed on plant matter. Frogs generally seize and ingest food by protruding their adhesive tongue and then swallow the item whole, often using their eyeballs and extraocular muscles to help pushing down the throat. And their digestive system is extremely efficient at converting what they eat into body mass. Being low-level consumers, both tadpoles and adult frogs are an important food source for other predators and a vital part of the food web dynamics of many of the world's ecosystems. Frogs, especially their muscular hindlimbs, are eaten by humans as food in many cuisines, and also have many cultural roles in literature, symbolism, and religion. They are environmental bellwethers, with declines in frog populations considered early warning signs of environmental degradation. Global frog populations and diversities have declined significantly since the 1950s. More than 1/3 of species are considered to be threatened with extinction, and over 120 are believed to have become extinct since the 1980s. Frog malformations are on the rise as an emerging fungal disease, chytridiomycosis, has spread around the world. Conservation biologists are working to solve these problems. Etymology and taxonomy. The use of the common names frog and toad has no taxonomic justification. From a classification perspective, all members of the order Anura are frogs, but only members of the family Bufonidae are considered true toads. The use of the term frog in common names usually refers to species that are aquatic or semi-aquatic and have smooth, moist skins. The term toad generally refers to species that are terrestrial with dry, warty skins. There are numerous exceptions to this rule. The European fire-bellied toad, Bombina bombina, has a slightly warty skin and prefers a watery habitat, whereas the Panamanian golden frog, Aetlopus zedeckii, is in the toad family Bufonidae and has a smooth skin. Etymology. The origin of the order name Anura, and its original spelling Anurs, is the ancient Greek alpha privative prefix letter 1F00 nu, and from letter 1F00 before a vowel, without, and omicron letter 1F50 rho alpha, horos, animal tail, meaning tailless. It refers to the tailless character of these amphibians. The origins of the word frog are uncertain and debated. The word is first attested in Old English as fraga, but the usual Old English word for the frog was frosk, with variants such as frox and forsk, and it is agreed that the word frog is somehow related to this. Old English frosk remained in dialectal use in English as frosch and frosk into the 19th century, and is paralleled widely in other Germanic languages, with examples in the modern languages including German frosch, Norwegian frosk, Icelandic frosker, and Dutch kick vors. These words allow reconstruction of a common Germanic ancestor froskes. The third edition of the Oxford English Dictionary finds that the etymology of asterisk froskes is uncertain, but agrees with arguments that it could plausibly derive from a Proto-Indo-European base along the lines of asterisk priu, meaning jump. How Old English frosk gave rise to fraga is, however, uncertain, as the development does not involve a regular sound change. Instead, it seems that there was a trend in Old English to coin nicknames for animals ending in G, with examples, themselves all of uncertain etymology, including dog, hog, pig, stag, and ear, wig. Frog appears to have been adapted from frosk as part of this trend. Meanwhile, the word toad, first attested as Old English tadige, is unique to English and is likewise of uncertain etymology. It is the basis for the word tadpole, first attested as Middle English tadpole, apparently meaning toad head. Taxonomy. About 87% of amphibian species are classified in the order Anura. These include over 7,700 species in 59 families, of which the Hylidae, 1062 sbp, Strabomantidae, 807 sbp, Microhylidae, 758 sbp, and Bufonidae, 657 sbp, are the richest in species. The Anura include all modern frogs and any fossil species that fit within the Anuran definition. The characteristics of Anuran adults include 9 or fewer prosacral vertebrae, the presence of a urostyle formed of fused vertebrae, no tail, a long and forward-sloping ilium, shorter forelimbs than hind limbs, radius and ulna fused, tibia and fibula fused, elongated ankle bones, absence of a prefrontal bone, presence of a hyoid plate, a lower jaw without teeth, with the exception of Gastroptheca consisting of 3 pairs of bones, angulosplenial, dentary, and mentomchelian, with the last pair being absent in Pipidia, an unsupported tongue, lymph spaces underneath the skin, and a muscle, the protractor lentis, attached to the lens of the eye. The Anuran larva or tadpole has a single central respiratory spiracle and mouthparts consisting of keratinous beaks and denticles. Frogs and toads are broadly classified into 3 suborders: Archaeobatrachia, which includes 4 families of primitive frogs; Mesobatrachia, which includes 5 families of more evolutionary intermediate frogs; and Neobatrachia, by far the largest group, which contains the remaining families of modern frogs, including most common species throughout the world. The suborder Neobatrachia is further divided into the 2 superfamilies Hylidae and Ranidae. This classification is based on such morphological features as the number of vertebrae, the structure of the pectoral girdle, and the morphology of tadpoles. While this classification is largely accepted, relationships among families of frogs are still debated. Some species of Anurans hybridize readily. For instance, the edible frog Pelophylax esculentus is a hybrid between the pool frog P. lesini and the marsh frog P. ridibundus. The fire-bellied toads Bambina bambina and B. variegata are similar in forming hybrids. These are less fertile than their parents, giving rise to a hybrid zone where the hybrids are prevalent. Evolution. The origins and evolutionary relationships between the 3 main groups of amphibians are hotly debated. A molecular phylogeny based on rDNA analysis dating from 2005 suggests that salamanders and caecilians are more closely related to each other than they are to frogs, and the divergence of the 3 groups took place in the Paleozoic or early Mesozoic, before the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea, and soon after their divergence from the lobe-finned fishes. This would help account for the relative scarcity of amphibian fossils from the period before the group split. Another molecular phylogenetic analysis, conducted about the same time, concluded that lissamphibians first appeared about 330 million years ago, and that the temnospondyl hypothesis is more credible than other theories. The neobatracians seem to have originated in Africa, India, the salamanders in East Asia, and the caecilians in tropical Pangaea. Other researchers, while agreeing with the main thrust of this study, questioned the choice of calibration points used to synchronize the data. They proposed that the date of lissamphibian diversification should be placed in the Permian, rather less than 300 million years ago, a date in better agreement with the paleontological data. A further study in 2011, using both extinct and living taxa sampled for morphological, as well as molecular data, came to the conclusion that lissamphibia is monophyletic, and that it should be nested within Lepispondyli rather than within Temnospondyli. The study postulated that lissamphibia originated no earlier than the late Carboniferous, some 290 to 305 million years ago. The split between Anura and Caudata was estimated as taking place 292 million years ago, rather later than most molecular studies suggest, with the caecilians splitting off 239 million years ago. In 2008, Jarabatrachus hotni, a temnospondyl with many frog and salamander-like characteristics, was discovered in Texas. It dated back 290 million years and was hailed as a missing link, a stem batrachian close to the common ancestor of frogs and salamanders, consistent with the widely accepted hypothesis that frogs and salamanders are more closely related to each other, forming a clade called batrachia, than they are to caecilians. However, others have suggested that Jarabatrachus hotni was only a disaurophoid temnospondyl, unrelated to extant amphibians. Salientia Latin salier salio, to jump, is the name of the total group that includes modern frogs in the order Anura as well as their close fossil relatives, the protofrogs or stem frogs. The common features possessed by these protofrogs include 14 prosacral vertebrae, modern frogs have 8 or 9, a long and forward-sloping ilium in the pelvis, the presence of a frontoparietal bone, and a lower jaw without teeth. The earliest known amphibians that were more closely related to frogs than to salamanders are Triadobatrachus masonodi, from the early Triassic period of Madagascar, about 250 million years ago, and Czakkobatrachus polonicus, from the early Triassic of Poland, about the same age as Triadobatrachus. The skull of Triadobatrachus is frog-like, being broad with large eye sockets, but the fossil has features diverging from modern frogs. These include a longer body with more vertebrae. The tail has separate vertebrae, unlike the fused urostyle or coccyx in modern frogs. The tibia and fibula bones are also separate, making it probable that Triadobatrachus was not an efficient leaper. A 2019 study has noted the presence of salientia from the Chinal Formation and suggested that Anurans might have first appeared during the late Triassic. On the basis of fossil evidence, the earliest known true frogs that fall into the Anuran lineage proper all lived in the early Jurassic period. One such early frog species, Prosalurus bitus, was discovered in 1995 in the Kanta Formation of Arizona and dates back to the early Jurassic epoch, 199.6 to 175 million years ago, making Prosalurus somewhat more recent than Triadobatrachus. Like the latter, Prosalurus did not have greatly enlarged legs, but had the typical three-pronged pelvic structure of modern frogs. Unlike Triadobatrachus, Prosalurus had already lost nearly all of its tail and was well adapted for jumping. Another early Jurassic frog is Vieirla herbsti, which is known only from dorsal and ventral impressions of a single animal and was estimated to be 33 millimeters, 114 in from snout to vent. Notobatrachus digeostoi from the Middle Jurassic is slightly younger, about 155 to 170 million years old. The main evolutionary changes in this species involved the shortening of the body and the loss of the tail. Tadpoles of N. digeostoi constitute the oldest tadpoles found as of 2024, dating back to 168 to 161 million years ago. These tadpoles also showed adaptations for filter feeding, implying residence in temporary pools by filter feeding larvae was already commonplace. The evolution of modern Anura likely was complete by the Jurassic period. Since then, evolutionary changes in chromosome numbers have taken place about 20 times faster in mammals than in frogs, which means speciation is occurring more rapidly in mammals. According to genetic studies, the families Hylidae, Microhylidae, and the clade Natatanura, comprising about 88% of living frogs, diversified simultaneously some 66 million years ago, soon after the Cretaceous, Paleogene extinction event associated with the Chicxulub impactor. All origins of arboreality, e.g. in Hylidae and Natatanura, follow from that time and the resurgence of forest that occurred afterwards. Frog fossils have been found on all of the Earth's continents. In 2020, it was announced that 40-million-year-old helmeted frog fossils had been discovered by a team of vertebrate paleontologists in Seymour Island on the Antarctic Peninsula, indicating that this region was once home to frogs related to those now living in South American Nothofagus forest. Morphology and physiology. Getty Images. Frogs have no tail except as larvae. Most frogs have long hind legs, elongated ankle bones, webbed toes, no claws, large eyes, and either smooth or warty skin. They have short vertebral columns, with no more than 10 free vertebrae and fused tailbones, urostyle or coccyx. Frogs range in size from a snout, vent length of 7.7 millimeters, 0.3, in the Pediphrine ameensis of Papua New Guinea, to about 35 centimeters, 14 in the Goliath frog, Conraw Goliath of Central Africa, which is about 3.3 kilograms, 7.3 pounds. Some extinct prehistoric species were even larger. Feet and legs. A frog's foot and leg structure is related to its habitat. Across species, these structures vary based on whether the species lives primarily on the ground, in water, in trees, or in burrows. Adult anurans have 4 fingers on the hands and 5 toes on the feet, but the smallest species often have hands and feet where some of the digits are vestigial. Frogs must be able to move quickly through their environment to catch prey and escape predators, and numerous adaptations help them to do so. Most frogs are either proficient jumpers or descend from ancestors that were, with much of the musculoskeletal morphology modified for this purpose. The tibia, fibula, and tarsals have been fused into a single strong bone, as have the radius and ulna in the forelimbs, which must absorb the impact on landing. The metatarsals have become elongated to add to the leg length, allowing frogs to push against the ground for a longer period on takeoff. The ilium has elongated and formed a mobile joint with the sacrum which, in specialist jumpers such as ranids and hylids, functions as an additional limb joint to further power the leaps. The tail vertebrae have fused into a urostyle, which is retracted inside the pelvis. This enables frogs to transfer force from the legs to the body during a leap. The muscular system has been similarly modified. The hind limbs of ancestral frogs presumably contained pairs of muscles which would act in opposition, one muscle to flex the knee, a different muscle to extend it, as is seen in most other limbed animals. However, in modern frogs, almost all muscles have been modified to contribute to the action of jumping, with only a few small muscles remaining to bring the limb back to the starting position and maintain posture. The muscles have also been greatly enlarged, with the main leg muscles accounting for over 17% of the total mass of frogs. Many frogs have webbed feet, and the degree of webbing is directly proportional to the amount of time the species spends in the water. The completely aquatic African dwarf frog, Hymenopterus sb, has fully webbed toes, whereas those of White's tree frog, Litoria caerulea, an arboreal species, are only a quarter or half webbed. Exceptions include flying frogs in the Hylidae and Rhacophoridae, which also have fully webbed toes used in gliding. Arboreal frogs have pads located on the ends of their toes to help grip vertical surfaces. These are not suction pads, the surface consisting instead of columnar cells with flat tops with small gaps between them lubricated by mucus glands. When the frog applies pressure, the cells adhere to irregularities on the surface, and the grip is maintained through adhesion. This allows the frog to climb on smooth surfaces, but the system does not function efficiently when the pads are excessively wet. In many arboreal frogs, A small intercalary structure on each toe increases the surface area touching the substrate. Furthermore, many arboreal frogs have hip joints that allow both hopping and walking. Some frogs that live high in trees even possess an elaborate degree of webbing between their toes. This allows the frogs to parachute or make a controlled glide from one position in the canopy to another. Ground-dwelling frogs generally lack the adaptations of aquatic and arboreal frogs. Most have smaller toe pads, if any, and little webbing. Some burrowing frogs, such as Couch's spadefoot, Scaphiopus couchii, have a flap-like toe extension on the hind feet, a keratinized tubercle often referred to as a spade, that helps them to burrow. Sometimes during the tadpole stage, one of the developing rear legs is eaten by a predator such as a dragonfly nymph. In some cases, the full leg still grows, but in others it does not, although the frog may still live out its normal lifespan with only 3 limbs. Occasionally, a parasitic flatworm, Riberoia onditri, digs into the rear of a tadpole, causing a rearrangement of the limb bud cells, and the frog develops 1 or more extra legs. Skin. A frog's skin is protective, has a respiratory function, can absorb water, and helps control body temperature. It has many glands, particularly on the head and back, which often exude distasteful and toxic substances, granular glands. The secretion is often sticky and helps keep the skin moist, protects against the entry of molds and bacteria, and makes the animal slippery and more able to escape from predators. The skin is shed every few weeks. It usually splits down the middle of the back and across the belly, and the frog pulls its arms and legs free. The slewed skin is then worked towards the head, where it is quickly eaten. Being cold-blooded, frogs have to adopt suitable behavior patterns to regulate their temperature. To warm up, they can move into the sun or onto a warm surface. If they overheat, they can move into the shade or adopt a stance that exposes the minimum area of skin to the air. This posture is also used to prevent water loss and involves the frog squatting close to the substrate with its hands and feet tucked under its chin and body. The color of a frog's skin is used for thermoregulation. In cool, damp conditions, the color will be darker than on a hot, dry day. The gray foam nest tree frog, Chiromantes zarampelina, is even able to turn white to minimize the chance of overheating. Many frogs are able to absorb water and oxygen directly through the skin, especially around the pelvic area, but the permeability of a frog's skin can also result in water loss. Glands located all over the body exude mucus, which helps keep the skin moist and reduces evaporation. Some glands on the hands and chest of males are specialized to produce sticky secretions to aid in amplexus. Similar glands in tree frogs produce a glue-like substance on the adhesive discs of the feet. Some arboreal frogs reduce water loss by having a waterproof layer of skin, and several South American species coat their skin with a waxy secretion. Other frogs have adopted behaviors to conserve water, including becoming nocturnal and resting in a water-conserving position. Some frogs may also rest in large groups with each frog pressed against its neighbors. This reduces the amount of skin exposed to the air or a dry surface, and thus reduces water loss. Woodhouse's toad, Bufo woodhousea, if given access to water after confinement in a dry location, sits in the shallows to rehydrate. The male hairy frog, Trichobatrachus robustus, has dermal papillae projecting from its lower back and thighs, giving it a bristly appearance. These contain blood vessels and are thought to increase the area of the skin available for respiration. Some species have bony plates embedded in the skin, a trait that appears to have evolved independently several times. In certain other species, the skin at the top of the head is compacted, and the connective tissue of the dermis is co-ossified with the bones of the skull, exostosis. Camouflage is a common defensive mechanism in frogs. Features such as warts and skin folds are usually on ground-dwelling frogs, for whom smooth skin would not provide such effective camouflage. Certain frogs change color between night and day, as light and moisture stimulate the pigment cells and cause them to expand or contract. Some are even able to control their skin texture. The Pacific tree frog, Pseudocris regilla, has green and brown morphs, plain or spotted, and changes color depending on the time of year and general background color. The wood frog, Lithobates sylvaticus, uses disruptive coloration including black eye markings similar to voids between leaves, bands of the dorsal skin, dorsolateral dermal plica, similar to a leaf midrib, as well as stains, spots, and leg stripes similar to fallen leaf features. Respiration and circulation. Like other amphibians, oxygen can pass through their highly permeable skins. This unique feature allows them to remain in places without access to the air, respiring through their skins. Ribs are generally absent, so the lungs are filled by buccal pumping, and a frog deprived of its lungs can maintain its body functions without them. The fully aquatic Bornean flat-headed frog, Barburula calamantanensis, is the first frog known to lack lungs entirely. Shutterstock. Explore. Frogs have three-chambered hearts, a feature they share with lizards. Oxygenated blood from the lungs and deoxygenated blood from the respiring tissues enter the heart through separate atria. When these chambers contract, the two blood streams pass into a common ventricle before being pumped via a spiral valve to the appropriate vessel, the aorta for oxygenated blood and pulmonary artery for deoxygenated blood. Some species of frog have adaptations that allow them to survive in oxygen-deficient water. The Titicaca water frog, Telmatobius cilius, is one such species and has wrinkly skin that increases its surface area to enhance gas exchange. It normally makes no use of its rudimentary lungs, but will sometimes raise and lower its body rhythmically while on the lake bed to increase the flow of water around it. Digestion and excretion. Shutterstock. Frogs have maxillary teeth along their upper jaw, which are used to hold food before it is swallowed. These teeth are very weak and cannot be used to chew or catch and harm agile prey. Instead, the frog uses its sticky, cleft tongue to catch insects and other small moving prey. The tongue normally lies coiled in the mouth, free at the back and attached to the mandible at the front. It can be shot out and retracted at great speed. In amphibians, there are salivary glands on the tongue, which in frogs produce what is called a two-phase viscoelastic fluid. When exposed to pressure, like when the tongue is wrapping around a prey, it becomes runny and covers the prey's body. As the pressure drops, it returns to a thick and elastic state, which gives the tongue an extra grip. Some frogs have no tongue and just stuff food into their mouths with their hands. The African bullfrog, Pyxacephalus, which preys on relatively large animals such as mice and other frogs, has cone-shaped bony projections called odontoid processes at the front of the lower jaw, which function like teeth. The eyes assist in the swallowing of food, as they can be retracted through holes in the skull and help push food down the throat. The food then moves through the esophagus into the stomach, where digestive enzymes are added and it is churned up. It then proceeds to the small intestine, duodenum and ileum, where most digestion occurs. Pancreatic juice from the pancreas and bile, produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder, are secreted into the small intestine, where the fluids digest the food and the nutrients are absorbed. The food residue passes into the large intestine, where excess water is removed, and the wastes are passed out through the cloaca. Although adapted to terrestrial life, frogs resemble freshwater fish in their inability to conserve body water effectively. When they are on land, much water is lost by evaporation from the skin. The excretory system is similar to that of mammals, and there are two kidneys that remove nitrogenous products from the blood. Frogs produce large quantities of dilute urine in order to flush out toxic products from the kidney tubules. The nitrogen is excreted as ammonia by tadpoles and aquatic frogs, but mainly as urea, a less toxic product, by most terrestrial adults. A few species of tree frog with little access to water excrete the even less toxic uric acid. The urine passes along paired ureters to the urinary bladder, from which it is vented periodically into the cloaca. All bodily wastes exit the body through the cloaca, which terminates in a cloacal vent. Reproductive system. In the male frog, the two testes are attached to the kidneys, and semen passes into the kidneys through fine tubes called efferent ducts. It then travels on through the ureters, which are consequently known as urinogenital ducts. There is no penis, and sperm is ejected from the cloaca directly onto the eggs as the female lays them. The ovaries of the female frog are beside the kidneys, and the eggs pass down a pair of oviducts and through the cloaca to the exterior. When frogs mate, the male climbs on the back of the female and wraps his forelimbs round her body, either behind the front legs or just in front of the hind legs. This position is called amplexus and may be held for several days. The male frog has certain hormone-dependent secondary sexual characteristics. These include the development of special pads on his thumbs in the breeding season to give him a firm hold. The grip of the male frog during amplexus stimulates the female to release eggs, usually wrapped in jelly, as spawn. In many species, the male is smaller and slimmer than the female. Males have vocal cords and make a range of croaks, particularly in the breeding season, and in some species they also have vocal sacs to amplify the sound. Nervous system. Shutterstock. Frogs have a highly developed nervous system that consists of a brain, spinal cord, and nerves. Many parts of frog brains correspond with those of humans. It consists of 2 olfactory lobes, 2 cerebral hemispheres, a pineal body, 2 optic lobes, a cerebellum, and a medulla oblongata. Muscular coordination and posture are controlled by the cerebellum, and the medulla oblongata regulates respiration, digestion, and other automatic functions. The relative size of the cerebrum in frogs is much smaller than it is in humans. Frogs have 10 pairs of cranial nerves, which pass information from the outside directly to the brain, and 10 pairs of spinal nerves, which pass information from the extremities to the brain through the spinal cord. By contrast, all amniotes, mammals, birds, and reptiles have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Sight. The eyes of most frogs are located on either side of the head, near the top, and project outwards as hemispherical bulges. They provide binocular vision over a field of 100 degrees to the front and a total visual field of almost 360 degrees. They may be the only part of an otherwise submerged frog to protrude from the water. Each eye has closable upper and lower lids and a nictitating membrane which provides further protection, especially when the frog is swimming. Members of the aquatic family Pipidae have the eyes located at the top of the head, a position better suited for detecting prey in the water above. The irises come in a range of colors and the pupils in a range of shapes. The common toad, Bufo, has golden irises and horizontal slit-like pupils. The red-eyed tree frog, Agolichnes caladrias, has vertical slit pupils. The poison dart frog has dark irises. The fire-bellied toad, Bambina sbp, has triangular pupils, and the tomato frog, Discophis sbp, has circular ones. The irises of the southern toad, Anaxyrus terrestris, are patterned so as to blend in with the surrounding camouflaged skin. The distant vision of a frog is better than its near vision. Calling frogs will quickly become silent when they see an intruder or even a moving shadow, but the closer an object is, the less well it is seen. When a frog shoots out its tongue to catch an insect, it is reacting to a small moving object that it cannot see well and must line it up precisely beforehand because it shuts its eyes as the tongue is extended. Although it was formerly debated, more recent research has shown that frogs can see in color, even in very low light. Hearing. Frogs can hear both in the air and below water. They do not have external ears. The eardrums, tympanic membranes, are directly exposed or may be covered by a layer of skin and are visible as a circular area just behind the eye. The size and distance a part of the eardrums is related to the frequency and wavelength at which the frog calls. In some species, such as the bullfrog, the size of the tympanum indicates the sex of the frog. Males have tympani that are larger than their eyes, while in females, the eyes and tympani are much the same size. A noise causes the tympanum to vibrate, and the sound is transmitted to the middle and inner ear. The middle ear contains semicircular canals, which help control balance and orientation. In the inner ear, the auditory hair cells are arranged in 2 areas of the cochlea, the basilar papilla and the amphibian papilla. The former detects high frequencies and the latter low frequencies. Because the cochlea is short, frogs use electrical tuning to extend their range of audible frequencies and help discriminate different sounds. This arrangement enables detection of the territorial and breeding calls of their conspecifics. In some species that inhabit arid regions, the sound of thunder or heavy rain may arouse them from a dormant state. A frog may be startled by an unexpected noise, but it will not usually take any action until it has located the source of the sound by sight. Life history. Reproduction. 2 main types of reproduction occur in frogs: prolonged breeding and explosive breeding. In the former, adopted by the majority of species, Adult frogs at certain times of year assemble at a pond, lake, or stream to breed. Many frogs return to the bodies of water in which they developed as larvae. This often results in annual migrations involving thousands of individuals. In explosive breeders, mature adult frogs arrive at breeding sites in response to certain trigger factors, such as rainfall occurring in an arid area. In these frogs, mating and spawning take place promptly, and the speed of larval growth is rapid in order to make use of the ephemeral pools before they dry up. Among prolonged breeders, males usually arrive at the breeding site first and remain there for some time, whereas females tend to arrive later and depart soon after they have spawned. This means that males outnumber females at the water's edge and defend territories from which they expel other males. They advertise their presence by calling, often alternating their croaks with neighboring frogs. Larger, stronger males tend to have deeper calls and maintain higher quality territories. Females select their mates at least partly on the basis of the depth of their voice. In some species, there are satellite males who have no territory and do not call. They may intercept females that are approaching a calling male or take over a vacated territory. Calling is an energy-sapping activity. Sometimes the two roles are reversed and a calling male gives up its territory and becomes a satellite. In explosive breeders, the first male that finds a suitable breeding location, such as a temporary pool, calls loudly and other frogs of both sexes converge on the pool. Explosive breeders tend to call in unison, creating a chorus that can be heard from far away. The spadefoot toads, Scaphiopus sbp, of North America fall into this category. Mate selection and courtship is not as important as speed in reproduction. In some years, suitable conditions may not occur, and the frogs may go for 2 or more years without breeding. Some female New Mexico spadefoot toads, Sp. multiplicata, only spawn half of the available eggs at a time, perhaps retaining some in case a better reproductive opportunity arises later. At the breeding site, the male mounts the female and grips her tightly round the body. Typically, amplexus takes place in the water, the female releases her eggs, and the male covers them with sperm. Fertilization is external. In many species such as the Great Plains toad, Bufo cognatus, the male restrains the eggs with his back feet, holding them in place for about 3 minutes. Members of the West African genus Nymphophrynoids are unique among frogs in that they are viviparous. Limnanex larvipartis, Eleutherodactylus jasperi, and members of the Tanzanian genus Nectophrenoids are the only frogs known to be ovoviviparous. In these species, fertilization is internal, and females give birth to fully developed juvenile frogs, except L. larvipartis, which give birth to tadpoles. Life cycle. Shutterstock. Egg/frog spawn. Frogs may lay their eggs as clumps, surface films, strings, or individually. Around half of species deposit eggs in water, others lay eggs in vegetation, on the ground or in excavations. The tiny yellow-striped pygmy eleuth, Eleutherodactylus limbatus, lays eggs singly, burying them in moist soil. The smoky jungle frog, Leptodactylus pentadactylus, makes a nest of foam in a hollow. The eggs hatch when the nest is flooded, or the tadpoles may complete their development in the foam if flooding does not occur. The red-eyed tree frog, Agolichnes calidrias, deposits its eggs on a leaf above a pool, and when they hatch, the larvae fall into the water below. In certain species, such as the wood frog, Rana sylvatica, symbiotic unicellular green algae are present in the gelatinous material. It is thought that these may benefit the developing larvae by providing them with extra oxygen through photosynthesis. The interior of globular egg clusters of the wood frog has also been found to be up to 6 degrees C, 11 degrees F, warmer than the surrounding water, and this speeds up the development of the larvae. The larvae developing in the eggs can detect vibrations caused by nearby predatory wasps or snakes, and will hatch early to avoid being eaten. In general, the length of the egg stage depends on the species and the environmental conditions. Aquatic eggs normally hatch within 1 week when the capsule splits as a result of enzymes released by the developing larvae. Direct development, where eggs hatch into juveniles like small adults, is also known in many frogs. For example, Ischnychnema henselae, Eleutherodactylus kochi, and Rhayorchests ochlindri and Rhayorchests chalazodes. Tadpoles. The larvae that emerge from the eggs are known as tadpoles or occasionally pollywogs. Tadpoles lack eyelids and limbs and have cartilaginous skeletons, gills for respiration, external gills at first, internal gills later, and tails they use for swimming. As a general rule, free-living larvae are fully aquatic, but at least one species, Nanophrys ceylonensis, has semi-terrestrial tadpoles which live among wet rocks. From early in its development, a gill pouch covers the tadpole's gills and front legs. The lungs soon start to develop and are used as an accessory breathing organ. Some species go through metamorphosis while still inside the egg and hatch directly into small frogs. Tadpoles lack true teeth, but the jaws in most species have two elongated, parallel rows of small keratinized structures called keratodonts in their upper jaws. Their lower jaws usually have 3 rows of keratodonts surrounded by a horny beak, but the number of rows can vary, and the exact arrangements of mouth parts provide a means for species identification. In the Pippidae, with the exception of Hymenocris, the tadpoles have paired anterior barbels, which make them resemble small catfish. Their tails are stiffened by a notochord, but does not contain any bony or cartilaginous elements except for a few vertebrae at the base, which forms the urostyle during metamorphosis. This has been suggested as an adaptation to their lifestyles. Because the transformation into frogs happens very fast, the tail is made of soft tissue only, as bone and cartilage take a much longer time to be broken down and absorbed. The tail fin and tip is fragile and will easily tear, which is seen as an adaptation to escape from predators which try to grasp them by the tail. Tadpoles are typically herbivorous, feeding mostly on algae, including diatoms filtered from the water through the gills. Some species are carnivorous at the tadpole stage, eating insects, smaller tadpoles, and fish. The Cuban tree frog, Osteopilus septentrionalis, is one of a number of species in which the tadpoles can be cannibalistic. Tadpoles that develop legs early may be eaten by the others, so late developers may have better long-term survival prospects. Tadpoles are highly vulnerable to being eaten by fish, newts, predatory diving beetles, and birds, particularly water birds, such as storks and herons and domestic ducks. Some tadpoles, including those of the cane toad, Rhinella marina, are poisonous. The tadpole stage may be as short as a week in explosive breeders, or it may last through 1 or more winters followed by metamorphosis in the spring. Metamorphosis. At the end of the tadpole stage, a frog undergoes metamorphosis in which its body makes a sudden transition into the adult form. This metamorphosis typically lasts only 24 hours and is initiated by production of the hormone thyroxine. This causes different tissues to develop in different ways. The principal changes that take place include the development of the lungs and the disappearance of the gills and gill pouch, making the front legs visible. The lower jaw transforms into the big mandible of the carnivorous adult, and the long, spiral gut of the herbivorous tadpole is replaced by the typical short gut of a predator. Homeostatic feedback control of food intake is largely absent, making tadpoles eat constantly when food is present. But shortly before and during metamorphosis, the sensation of hunger is suppressed, and they stop eating while their gut and internal organs are reorganized and prepared for a different diet. Also, the gut microbiota changes, from being similar to that of fish to resembling that of amniotes. Exceptions are carnivorous tadpoles like Lepidopteryx levis, which has a gut already adapted to a diet similar to that of adults. These continue to eat during metamorphosis. The nervous system becomes adapted for hearing and stereoscopic vision, and for new methods of locomotion and feeding. The eyes are repositioned higher up on the head, and the eyelids and associated glands are formed. The eardrum, middle ear, and inner ear are developed. The skin becomes thicker and tougher, the lateral line system is lost, and skin glands are developed. The final stage is the disappearance of the tail, but this takes place rather later, the tissue being used to produce a spurt of growth in the limbs. Frogs are at their most vulnerable to predators when they are undergoing metamorphosis. At this time, the tail is being lost, and locomotion by means of limbs is only just becoming established. Adults. Adult frogs may live in or near water, but few are fully aquatic. Almost all frog species are carnivorous as adults, preying on invertebrates, including insects, crabs, spiders, mites, worms, snails, and slugs. A few of the larger ones may eat other frogs, small mammals and reptiles, and fish. A few species also eat plant matter. The tree frog Xenohyla truncata is partly herbivorous, its diet including a large proportion of fruit, floral structures, and nectar. Leptodactylus mystaceus has been found to eat plants, and folivory occurs in Euphlactes hexadactylus, with plants constituting 79.5% of its diet by volume. Many frogs use their sticky tongues to catch prey, while others simply grab them with their mouths. Adult frogs are themselves attacked by many predators. The northern leopard frog, Rana pipiens, is eaten by herons, hawks, fish, large salamanders, snakes, raccoons, skunks, mink, bullfrogs, and other animals. Frogs are primary predators and an important part of the food web. Being cold-blooded, they make efficient use of the food they eat with little energy being used for metabolic processes, while the rest is transformed into biomass. They are themselves eaten by secondary predators and are the primary terrestrial consumers of invertebrates, most of which feed on plants. By reducing herbivory, they play a part in increasing the growth of plants and are thus part of a delicately balanced ecosystem. Little is known about the longevity of frogs and toads in the wild, but some can live for many years. Skeletochronology is a method of examining bones to determine age. Using this method, the ages of mountain yellow-legged frogs, Rana muscosa, were studied, the phalanges of the toes showing seasonal lines where growth slows in winter. The oldest frogs had 10 bands, so their age was believed to be 14 years, including the 4-year tadpole stage. Captive frogs and toads have been recorded as living for up to 40 years, an age achieved by a European common toad, Bufo bufo. The cane toad, Rhinella marina, has been known to survive 24 years in captivity, and the American bullfrog, Rana caduspeiana, 14 years. Frogs from temperate climates hibernate during the winter, and 4 species are known to be able to withstand freezing during this time, including the wood frog, Rana sylvatica. Parental care. Male common midwife toad, Alates obstetricans with eggs. Shutterstock. Pouched frog, Acidarlingtoni. Although care of offspring is poorly understood in frogs, up to an estimated 20% of amphibian species may care for their young in some way. The evolution of parental care in frogs is driven primarily by the size of the water body in which they breed. Those that breed in smaller water bodies tend to have greater and more complex parental care behavior. Because predation of eggs and larvae is high in large water bodies, some frog species started to lay their eggs on land. Once this happened, the desiccating terrestrial environment demands that one or both parents keep them moist to ensure their survival. The subsequent need to transport hatched tadpoles to a water body required an even more intense form of parental care. In small pools, predators are mostly absent and competition between tadpoles becomes the variable that constrains their survival. Certain frog species avoid this competition by making use of smaller phytoomata, water-filled leaf axils, or small woody cavities, as sites for depositing a few tadpoles. While these smaller rearing sites are free from competition, they also lack sufficient nutrients to support a tadpole without parental assistance. Frog species that changed from the use of larger to smaller phytoomata have evolved a strategy of providing their offspring with nutritive but unfertilized eggs. The female strawberry poison dart frog, Oophaga pumilio, lays her eggs on the forest floor. The male frog guards them from predation and carries water in his cloaca to keep them moist. When they hatch, the female moves the tadpoles on her back to a water-holding bromeliad or other similar water body, depositing just one in each location. She visits them regularly and feeds them by laying 1 or 2 unfertilized eggs in the phytolma, continuing to do this until the young are large enough to undergo metamorphosis. The granular poison frog, Oophaga granulifera, looks after its tadpoles in a similar way. Many other diverse forms of parental care are seen in frogs. The tiny male Colostethus subpunctatus stands guard over his egg cluster, laid under a stone or log. When the eggs hatch, he transports the tadpoles on his back to a temporary pool, where he partially immerses himself in the water and 1 or more tadpoles drop off. He then moves on to another pool. The male common midwife toad, Alates obstetricans, carries the eggs around with him attached to his hind legs. He keeps them damp and dry, whether by immersing himself in a pond, and prevents them from getting too wet in soggy vegetation by raising his hindquarters. After 3 to 6 weeks, he travels to a pond and the eggs hatch into tadpoles. The Tungara frog, Physolemus pustulosus, builds a floating nest from foam to protect its eggs from predation. The foam is made from proteins and lectins and seems to have antimicrobial properties. Several pairs of frogs may form a colonial nest on a previously built raft. The eggs are laid in the center, followed by alternate layers of foam and eggs, finishing with a foam capping. Some frogs protect their offspring inside their own bodies. Both male and female pouched frogs, Assa darlingtoni, guard their eggs, which are laid on the ground. When the eggs hatch, the male lubricates his body with the jelly surrounding them and immerses himself in the egg mass. The tadpoles wriggle into skin pouches on his side, where they develop until they metamorphose into juvenile frogs. The female gastric brooding frog, Rheobatrachus sp. from Australia, now probably extinct, swallows her fertilized eggs, which then develop inside her stomach. She ceases to feed and stops secreting stomach acid. The tadpoles rely on the yolks of the eggs for nourishment. After 6 or 7 weeks, they are ready for metamorphosis. The mother regurgitates the tiny frogs, which hop away from her mouth. The female Darwin's frog, Rhinoderma darwinii, from Chile, lays up to 40 eggs on the ground, where they are guarded by the male. When the tadpoles are about to hatch, they are engulfed by the male, which carries them around inside his much enlarged vocal sac. Here they are immersed in a frothy, viscous liquid that contains some nourishment to supplement what they obtain from the yolks of the eggs. They remain in the sac for 7 to 10 weeks before undergoing metamorphosis, after which they move into the male's mouth and emerge. Defense. Shutterstock. Explore. The mildly toxic Ranitomia imitator. Shutterstock. Strawberry poison dart frog contains numerous alkaloids which deter predators. At first sight, frogs seem rather defenseless because of their small size, slow movement, thin skin, and lack of defensive structures, such as spines, claws, or teeth. Many use camouflage to avoid detection, the skin often being spotted or streaked in neutral colors that allow a stationary frog to merge into its surroundings. Some can make prodigious leaps, often into water, that help them to evade potential attackers, while many have other defensive adaptations and strategies. The skin of many frogs contains mild toxic substances called bufatoxins to make them unpalatable to potential predators. Most toads and some frogs have large poison glands, the parotoid glands, located on the sides of their heads behind the eyes and other glands elsewhere on their bodies. These glands secrete mucus and a range of toxins that make frogs slippery to hold and distasteful or poisonous. If the noxious effect is immediate, the predator may cease its action and the frog may escape. If the effect develops more slowly, the predator may learn to avoid that species in future. Poisonous frogs tend to advertise their toxicity with bright colors, an adaptive strategy known as aposematism. The poison dart frogs in the family Dendrobatidae do this. They are typically red, orange, or yellow, often with contrasting black markings on their bodies. Alabates zaparo is not poisonous, but mimics the appearance of 2 different toxic species with which it shares a common range in an effort to deceive predators. Other species, such as the European fire-bellied toad, Bombina bombina, have their warning color underneath. They flash this when attacked, adopting a pose that exposes the vivid coloring on their bellies. Shutterstock. A common toad, adopting a defensive stance. Some frogs, such as the poison dart frogs, are especially toxic. The native peoples of South America extract poison from these frogs to apply to their weapons for hunting, although few species are toxic enough to be used for this purpose. At least 2 non-poisonous frog species in tropical America, Eleutherodactylus gage and Lithidites lineatus, mimic the coloration of dart poison frogs for self-protection. Some frogs obtain poisons from the ants and other arthropods they eat. Others, such as the Australian corroboree frogs, Pseudophrine corroboree and Pseudophrine pangolii, can synthesize the alkaloids themselves. The chemicals involved may be irritants, hallucinogens, convulsants, nerve poisons, or vasoconstrictors. Many predators of frogs have become adapted to tolerate high levels of these poisons, but other creatures, including humans who handle the frogs, may be severely affected. Some frogs use bluff or deception. The European common toad, bufo, adopts a characteristic stance when attacked, inflating its body and standing with its hindquarters raised and its head lowered. The bullfrog, Rana cataspeiana, crouches down with eyes closed and head tipped forward when threatened. This places the parotoid glands in the most effective position. The other glands on its back begin to ooze noxious secretions, and the most vulnerable parts of its body are protected. Another tactic used by some frogs is to scream, the sudden loud noise tending to startle the predator. The gray tree frog, Hyla versicolor, makes an explosive sound that sometimes repels the shrew Blarina brevicata. Although toads are avoided by many predators, the common garter snake, Thamnophis sertalis, regularly feeds on them. The strategy employed by juvenile American toads, Bufo americanus, on being approached by a snake is to crouch down and remain immobile. This is usually successful, with the snake passing by and the toad remaining undetected. If it is encountered by the snake's head, however, the toad hops away before crouching defensively. Distribution. Although frogs are most diverse in warm regions, a few species like the wood frog live at the Arctic Circle. Frogs live on every continent except Antarctica, but they are not present on certain islands, especially those far away from continental landmasses. Many species are isolated in restricted ranges by changes of climate or inhospitable territory, such as stretches of sea, mountain ridges, deserts, forest clearance, road construction, or other human-made barriers. Usually, a greater diversity of frogs occurs in tropical areas than in temperate regions, such as Europe. Some frogs inhabit arid areas, such as deserts, and rely on specific adaptations to survive. Members of the Australian genus Cyclorana bury themselves underground, where they create a water-impervious cocoon in which to estivate during dry periods. Once it rains, they emerge, find a temporary pool, and breed. Egg and tadpole development is very fast compared with those of most other frogs, so breeding can be completed before the pond dries up. Some frog species are adapted to a cold environment. The wood frog, Rana sylvatica, whose habitat extends into the Arctic Circle, buries itself in the ground during winter. Although much of its body freezes during this time, it maintains a high concentration of glucose in its vital organs, which protects them from damage. Conservation. See also, decline in amphibian populations. Shutterstock. Explore. Golden toad, Bufo paragons, last seen in 1989. In 2006, of 4,035 species of amphibians that depend on water during some life cycle stage, 1,356, 33.6%, were considered to be threatened. This is likely to be an underestimate because it excludes 1,427 species for which evidence was insufficient to assess their status. Frog populations have declined dramatically since the 1950s. More than one-third of frog species are considered to be threatened with extinction, and more than 120 species are believed to have become extinct since the 1980s. Among these species are the gastric-rooting frogs of Australia and the golden toad of Costa Rica. The latter is of particular concern to scientists because it inhabited the pristine Monteverde Cloud Forest Reserve, and its population crashed in 1987, along with about 20 other frog species in the area. This could not be linked directly to human activities, such as deforestation, and was outside the range of normal fluctuations in population size. Elsewhere, habitat loss is a significant cause of frog population decline, as are pollutants, climate change, increased UVB radiation, and the introduction of non-native predators and competitors. A Canadian study conducted in 2006 suggested heavy traffic in their environment was a larger threat to frog populations than was habitat loss. Emerging infectious diseases, including chytridiomycosis and ranavirus, are also devastating populations. Many environmental scientists believe amphibians, including frogs, are good biological indicators of broader ecosystem health because of their intermediate positions in food chains, their permeable skins, and typically biphasic lives, aquatic larvae and terrestrial adults. It appears that species with both aquatic eggs and larvae are most affected by the decline, while those with direct development are the most resistant. Deformed mink frog with an extra left leg. Frog mutations and genetic defects have increased since the 1990s. These often include missing legs or extra legs. Various causes have been identified or hypothesized, including an increase in ultraviolet radiation affecting the spawn on the surface of ponds, chemical contamination from pesticides and fertilizers, and parasites such as the trematode Riberoia ondatri. Probably all these are involved in a complex way as stressors, environmental factors contributing to rates of disease, and vulnerability to attack by parasites. Malformations impair mobility, and the individuals may not survive to adulthood. An increase in the number of frogs eaten by birds may actually increase the likelihood of parasitism of other frogs, because the trematode's complex life cycle includes the ramshorn snail and several intermediate hosts such as birds. In a few cases, captive breeding programs have been established and have largely been successful. The World Association of Zoos and Aquariums named 2008 as the Year of the Frog, in order to draw attention to the conservation issues faced by them. The cane toad, Rhinella marina, is a very adaptable species native to South and Central America. In the 1930s, it was introduced into Puerto Rico, and later various other islands in the Pacific and Caribbean region, as a biological pest control agent. In 1935, 3,000 toads were liberated in the sugar cane fields of Queensland, Australia, in an attempt to control cane beetles such as Dermalpida albohirdum, the larvae of which damage and kill the canes. Initial results in many of these countries were positive, but it later became apparent that the toads upset the ecological balance in their new environments. They bred freely, competed with native frog species, ate bees and other harmless native invertebrates, had few predators in their adopted habitats, and poisoned pets, carnivorous birds, and mammals. In many of these countries, they are now regarded both as pests and invasive species, and scientists are looking for a biological method to control them. Human uses. Culinary. Main article, frog legs. French cuisses de grenouille. Frog legs are eaten by humans in many parts of the world. Indonesia is the world's largest exporter of frog meat, exporting more than 5,000 tons of frog meat each year, mostly to France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Originally, they were supplied from local wild populations, but overexploitation led to a diminution in the supply. This resulted in the development of frog farming and a global trade in frogs. The main importing countries are France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the United States, while the chief exporting nations are Indonesia and China. The annual global trade in the American bullfrog, Rana cataspeana, mostly farmed in China, varies between 1,200 and 2,400 tons. The mountain chicken frog, so called as it tastes of chicken, is now endangered, in part due to human consumption, and was a major food choice of the Dominicans. Raccoon, opossum, partridges, prairie chicken, and frogs were among the fare Mark Twain recorded as part of American cuisine. Scientific research. In November 1970, NASA sent 2 bullfrogs into space for 6 days during the orbiting frog otolith mission to test weightlessness. Frogs are used for dissections in high school and university anatomy classes, often first being injected with colored substances to enhance contrasts among the biological systems. This practice is declining due to animal welfare concerns, and digital frogs are now available for virtual dissection. Frogs have served as experimental animals throughout the history of science. 18th century biologist Luigi Galvani discovered the link between electricity and the nervous system by studying frogs. He created one of the first tools for measuring electric current out of a frog leg. In 1852, H.F. Stanius used a frog's heart in a procedure called a Stanius ligature to demonstrate the ventricle and atria beat independently of each other and at different rates. The African clawed frog, or Platana, Xenopus laevis, was first widely used in laboratories in pregnancy tests in the first half of the 20th century. A sample of urine from a pregnant woman injected into a female frog induces it to lay eggs, a discovery made by English zoologist Lancelot Hogben. This is because a hormone, human chorionic gonadotropin, is present in substantial quantities in the urine of women during pregnancy. In 1952, Robert Briggs and Thomas J. King cloned a frog by somatic cell nuclear transfer. This same technique was later used to create Dolly the sheep, and their experiment was the first time a successful nuclear transplantation had been accomplished in higher animals. Frogs are used in cloning research and other branches of embryology. Frogs of the genus Xenopus are used as a model organism in developmental biology because their embryos are large and easy to manipulate. They are readily obtainable and can easily be kept in the laboratory. Xenopus laevis is increasingly being displaced by its smaller relative, Xenopus tropicalis, which reaches its reproductive age in 5 months rather than the 1 to 2 years for X. laevis, thus facilitating faster studies across generations. Genomes of Xenopus laevis, X. tropicalis, Rana cataspeana, Rhinella marina, and Nanorana parkeri have been sequenced and deposited in the NCBI genome database. Pharmaceutical. Shutterstock. Explore. Golden poison frog, Phyllobates terribilis. Because frog toxins are extraordinarily diverse, they have raised the interest of biochemists as a natural pharmacy. The alkaloid epibetadine, a painkiller 200 times more potent than morphine, is made by some species of poison dart frogs. Other chemicals isolated from the skins of frogs may offer resistance to HIV infection. Dart poisons are under active investigation for their potential as therapeutic drugs. It has long been suspected that pre-Columbian Mesoamericans used a toxic secretion produced by the cane toad as a hallucinogen, but more likely they used substances secreted by the Colorado River toad, Bufo alvarius. These contain bufotenin, 5-MeO-DMT, a psychoactive compound that has been used in modern times as a recreational drug. Typically, the skin secretions are dried and then smoked. Illicit drug use by licking the skin of a toad has been reported in the media, but this may be an urban myth. Exudations from the skin of the golden poison frog, Phyllobates terribilis, are traditionally used by native Colombians to poison the darts they use for hunting. The tip of the projectile is rubbed over the back of the frog, and the dart is launched from a blowgun. The combination of the 2 alkaloid toxins batracotixin and homobatracotixin is so powerful. One frog contains enough poison to kill an estimated 22,000 mice. 2 other species, the Kako poison dart frog, Phyllobates orotinea, and the black-legged dart frog, Phyllobates bicolor, are also used for this purpose. These are less toxic and less abundant than the golden poison frog. They are impaled on pointed sticks and may be heated over a fire to maximize the quantity of poison that can be transferred to the dart. Cultural significance. Main article, Frogs in Culture. Shutterstock. Moche frog sculpture. Frogs have been featured in mythology, fairy tales, and popular culture. In traditional Chinese myths, the world rests on a giant frog who would try to swallow the moon, causing the lunar eclipse. Frogs have been featured in religion, folklore, and popular culture. The ancient Egyptians depicted the god Hecate, protector of newborns, with the head of a frog. For the Mayans, frogs represented water, crops, fertility, and birth, and were associated with the god Chak. In the Bible, Moses unleashes a plague of frogs on the Egyptians. Medieval Europeans associated frogs and toads with evil and witchcraft. The Brothers Grimm fairy tale The Frog Prince features a princess taking in a frog and it turning into a handsome prince. In modern culture, frogs may take a comedic or hapless role, such as Mr. Toad of the 1908 novel The Wind in the Willows, Michigan J. Frog of Warner Bros. Cartoons, the Muppet Kermit the Frog, and in the game Frogger.